Hi, everyone. Number one Marmaduke fan here, trying to work my way through a whole bunch of $1 debuts to find series to get into. And I've kind of been dipping my toes into the Valiant universe, and this Archer and Armstrong number one was not a great toe dip. I have a thesis. The thing I'm thinking about is in a lot of arguments, you'll hear people say, can you just imagine if this was the other way around? And sometimes people roast that or they say that's not a good argument. I think that the benefit of thinking that way, of imagining a book or a political controversy, but changing the genders or races or political ideologies around, is it helps you think about principles over the maybe emotional historionics of the situation. So if you're arguing about whether something is racist or not, you try to imagine if the races were different and if you would still call it racist in a number of circumstances. And the benefit of that is you get at what's the story about? What are the kind of raw facts about the story? And that helps you try to figure out what the intent of the art is. So even though that argument can be abused, but everything before the word but doesn't matter. When I read Archer and Armstrong, I read this as the whole humor. The reason this book is supposed to be funny is tee-hee, Midwestern right-wing fundy Christians. Am I right? They are so silly. And in absence of that, this is supposed to be a funny book, and I kind of started groaning when I realized I was supposed to be laughing at this book. In the absence of the joke that tee-hee Midwestern right wingers being stupid, there's no humor to this book. And can you imagine if Muslims were the right wing religion being targeted for humor in this book? Well, I can imagine South Park doing that. And so I have something I call like the South Park pass. If you are South Park, well, of course, South Park makes fun of Jesus. Of course, South Park makes fun of everything. They made fun of Muhammad and they got that episode banned. So South Park has kind of earned the cred, enough cred to not have that argument apply to them because they actually have they actually have fulfilled the can you imagine if they make fun of Jesus, can you imagine if they made fun of Muhammad? South Park did make fun of Muhammad, but I can't imagine Valiant telling a story like this with anyone but right-wing, Midwestern, white male, blonde, Republican Christians as the target for mockery. And this limits their audience. I think it's an issue of them projecting their own biases onto other people. And it's kind of cringy because this has to happen, I guess, in the same universe as some of the other good books I've been reading. There are good books like Ninjak and Exo Man of War where they're just fun, cool action stories. And then I get this, and I don't know, it doesn't feel like it belongs in the same universe. Like this is wacko. This is wacko world. So I kind of started picking up that maybe this is supposed to be some sort of joke based on the dialogue and, you know, how big the words are. So like these two guys fight over the boon and then they blow up everything and they quote Genesis and the flood of Noah. And then we immediately transition to what's essentially like a Ken Ham Adventureland, like his Ark Encounter experience. So it's a like young Earth creationist theme park, but then they're sort of mixing up their references in a bit of a weird way. So young Earth creationists exist. Weird cults of people who believe the end times are coming and want to sell you survival packs exist. Because they exist, it's okay to have them in stories and make fun of some weird Christian cults. But are they making fun of weird Christian cults? I don't think so. And I base that based on how they write. So let's see. You can just tell by how the dialogue is written that what they're doing is they're projecting sort of negative ideas and attitudes onto middle America, red state America. And that's the joke. If you don't find laughing at red state America funny, you're not going to find much of this funny. So this dad is scooting around because he's fat on his scooter and he's got diabetes. Well, this is the same company that produces Faith in the Future Force and has added about 400 pounds to Faith's weight as part of a body positivity message. So the message I'm getting from this is that making fun of fat people is evil and problematic when it's Faith on Faith in the Future Force. But it's A-okay if you're kind of making fun of young Earth creationists, Midwestern Republicans. Am I right? And they're all white and chubby. Oh boy, those red staters. It looks like it's it looks like there's no standard. It looks like there's no principles. Do they believe in body positivity because it's the popular, hip, woke thing to do, or do they actually believe in that? If they actually believe in body positivity, this is a contradiction of their own morals. They are making fun of these people for being fat, and the kind of creationist theater. They make fun of Darwin. And now here's this kid, Obadiah, and he's doing some martial arts, and all the kids have kind of biblical names. Now, at first I thought he was killing these kids because of how hard he's kicking them, but it turns out he's just knocking them out. And look, his mom and dad, they just happen to be white and blonde and Aryan looking, and they're part of the Dominion. So they're just pulling little biblical phrases out to try to make sense, but it doesn't quite feel like anything. This doesn't feel like Freemasons. This doesn't feel like weird, premillennial cults that are waiting for the apocalypse to come tomorrow. It just feels sort of like this is generic Midwest Christian republicanism is supposed to be the target for humor here. So they're waiting for the apocalypse, and they're going to send out their son to kill the son of perdition. All right. Well, even weird premillennial cults, there's not anything quite like that in real life. Sure, they're weird, and they're getting their bunkers ready for the apocalypse, which they expect to happen any minute now. But they don't send out anybody to assassinate people. If you wanted to do Wahhabi Islam, you could that would probably have a little bit of a connection to real life. But they won't do that with Wahhabi Islam or Shia Islam or Sunni Islam because they're scared. They know that if they do the same thing to those groups that they do to generic right-wing fundamentalism in this book, they are going to be in huge trouble, probably from threat from individuals who will want to hurt them, like the Danish cartoonists, and from an intelligentsia and a press, which will accuse them of Islamophobia. I think this has been a big fat problem for the academic left, is just this sort of huge feeling of blatant hypocrisy, that they'll hold some people to one standard, but they won't hold another people to another set of standards. Oh, he's got like 60 stepbrothers and stepsisters because those Midwestern Republicans, am I right? They have so many kids. But in this is kind of a positive portrayal. They're taking on all these kids, giving them an education. These are kids who probably would have just been stuck in a little orphanage without a good mother and father role figure, and they're getting an education here. Okay, well, they're kind of doing the bit. This is a cult. They don't go out into the outside world. They're sort of Amish and fundamentalists. What am I trying to say? Because I've made it open on this channel that I am a politically conservative, believing Protestant Christian. So I think the point I'm trying to get at is that people tend to be most sensitive about mockery that's targeted at their group. So what I'm not trying to say is, oh, boo-hoo, poor me, I'm so persecuted and oppressed. I'm just trying to point out that because people like me are the target for this humor, presumably, I'm more sensitive to that type of thing. And then that begs the question, well, would they do this to another group, or is this good storytelling? There we go. So what I like to imagine for my own storytelling is, how do I make sure I don't come off sounding like Jack Chick if I want some of my beliefs or my politics to be a subtext in the story? And one way I might do that is try to imagine the same story with a different set of characters. So if I have a socialist villain, well, I try to imagine it as a capitalist villain instead. And then I think, well, would this capitalist villain just come off as, commie filth propaganda, or would it actually feel like a pretty cool story still? And if I can change some of the belief systems or religions around, and it still feels like a cool story, then I'll have a feel that I'm not just making fun of people I don't like, or just making political propaganda for my own set of beliefs. I feel like I'm telling a story if I can change these things around. If I try to change this story around in my head and say, what if I wanted to make fun of New York atheist progressives? And I wrote a story where this was a little New York progressive atheist cult, and they sent out their kung fu kid to beat up the horrible Midwesterners. I'd be embarrassed, and I'd say, this is lame. This isn't funny. This isn't cool. I would feel like I was writing dumb right-wing fundamentalist political tracks and not writing a real story. So because I can do that thought experiment, even though I don't think I'm being overly sensitive when I say this doesn't feel like genuine humor. This feels like superficial level political messaging. So Out he goes into the real world out of creationist land. And they come close to giving him some actual character and some possible depth, but they just keep doing the little tee-hee. He's a Midwestern right-wing religious kid. Mom and Pop always taught us Manhattan is a rat's nest of liberal, Marxist, atheist Nazis who want to rob us of our freedom by making us dependent on government handouts. Ha ha, one whole paragraph. What's the joke? Right-wing Midwesterners, am I right? That's the kind of thing. If I flip this in my head and the joke is, ha ha, New York, liberal Marxist atheist Nazis from New York, am I right? They're so regressive and they're so stupid because they don't believe in God. Well, that's not funny. That's not funny. That's only funny to people who already hate that group of people and want to laugh at them. The only person who finds this funny is a person who's already inclined to just laugh at a large swath of the American public for believing what they believe or acting a certain way. And there's no joke. The joke is, ha ha, someone you don't like. He kind of has this cool moment where, he thinks about how sex is more meaningful than just being an object. He walks past the naked cowboy. He sees an American flag and sort of basks in its glow. Yeah, they just keep making a point that, oh, he's a sexist. He thinks women belong with their fathers or husbands. And then Armstrong saves them. And apparently this Armstrong guy is the son of perdition he's been looking for. Armstrong's some kind of immortal. He's been around for millennia and since the founding. And then he wakes up inside of where is it? On Wall Street. I've been locked up a few times here over the centuries. And he remembers hearing Washington and the founders arguing, right? So you can't make fun of Midwesterners without making fun of the founding fathers, right? Because, those Midwestern Republicans, they worship the founding fathers, don't they? And if you're selling, that's what this is. This is a comic book for that sort of woke SJW audience that'll buy one issue of Riri Williams' Invincible Iron Man so they can hold a picture and say, see, I'm supporting diversity in comics, and then they never buy an issue again. This is a comic made for people who kind of Twitter at dumb creationists from #thescience memes and then spend the rest of their day talking about how gender doesn't exist or how FBI statistics are hate facts or something. This is only funny if you hate a group of people so much that you find it amusing when your projection of hatred is put in their mouths. Oh, those right-wingers, they hate us New Yorkers so much. I don't know. It feels like projection to me. And then he breaks out, and here's where it gets even worse. So out he comes, and it turns out that his mom and dad, and his mom's a congresswoman. Oh, those right-wing congresswomen, am I right? Sort of got that, I don't know, Michelle Bachmann style haircut, I'm sure deliberately. They're working with literally the 1%. And the 1% serve Mammon, and they worship greed. Greed is not just good, greed is godly. So this is supposed, and they've got a golden calf that's also sort of a Wall Street bull. So I know what this is. This is sort of about Ayn Randian libertarian style economics and the 1%, literally the 1%, working with those stupid right-wing Midwesterners. So Jeff Smith did this. One of the last things he wrote for Bone was just sort of this shot across the bow out of nowhere at Christian republicanism. And it sort of spoiled the effect of Bone for me, because after this fantastic fantasy story, his parting words, the last thing he leaves you with, is just sort of a petty shot about those Republicans, am I right, at the end of this creative masterpiece. So this is sort of this idea that, right-wing Republicans, they're the slaves of Wall Street and of capitalism. Oh boy, corporatism. And they worship the golden bull. I don't know. And so then they negotiate, and the 1% say that, well, we're not going to honor our deal with you. We're going to build the boon and destroy the world or get rich trying or whatever. So this is sort of like when I reviewed Glenn Keane's Christian children's books. And the argument I was trying to make is that Glenn Keane, while writing Christian children's books, because he's an artist and a storyteller, cares about telling a beautiful story. So he can sublimate his Christian beliefs, which might trigger a lot of people, into the context of a story that's so wonderful that an atheist could appreciate it and kind of nod and see the wisdom or the value in Glenn Keane's story that he creates. If you can't effectively do that, if you don't care about creating a story and you want to make a political story, you use these very superficial tropes. The 1%, they worship the golden calf. They worship greed. Right-wing religious fundamentalists, they're all white and Aryan, blue-eyed looking. They homeschool. They hate New Yorkers. It's so superficial that it's hard to just accept this as existing in reality. This reality only exists in the imaginations of people who want to be offended and want to be angry about those Republicans. But in real life, it doesn't connect with anything. There are fundamentalist groups and Westboro Baptist Church groups in America, but there's none that quite feel like what they're trying to convey here. It's this weird mashup. I'm trying to think of the other things. Sometimes I'll see in TV, they'll have like the funny religious character, but it won't make much sense. It'll be sort of like a combination of Catholic and Protestant that doesn't really exist. All they're trying to do is just say this is a very religious person for comedic effect, but it won't feel like any particular religion that exists in real life. This is a weird mashup of different tropes of Midwestern religious people, but there's nothing quite in real life which feels like this or looks like this. So any legitimate criticism, you might say, oh, well, there really are premillennial people who believe the apocalypse is coming. Yes, but they don't have secret societies with Wall Street people who worship golden calves. I can't connect with this. And pretty much what's wrong about this is now anytime I pick up a story with this guy, I have to accept that he really was raised to be a kung fu expert in a creation science carnival, and that he was also part of a assassination cult to bring on the end times. And I don't know. What I was thinking, I thought about how I would fix this. The way I would fix this if I was asked to write this character is he would keep his religious faith even after becoming disillusioned with the cult where he was brought up. And then Armstrong would be kind of a counterpoint. So we'd have this great sort of left-wing, right-wing counterpoint to one another, where the whole point is they work together great. And maybe they try to do that with Archer in later stories. But as I read him now, all he is sort of a caricature. And it's hard to appreciate a caricature as a real character with human emotions and personality. So my advice is, if a company wants to make fun of a group, Diverging Comics talks a lot about not hiring people, but casting people. So who is it? Priest. He's a comic book writer. Is it Christopher Priest? He talks about how he wasn't getting hired to write comic books. He was getting cast to write black characters because he's a black writer. So this is a little weird, but I'm saying if you want to make fun of communists, and the whole point of the story is to make fun of communists, maybe have a communist have some input on how the communist character acts so he can feel like a authentic communist. If you want to make fun of Muslims, maybe have some input from a Muslim or an ex-Muslim who's knowledgeable of the religion, so that the character has some flavor of reality to them. I would be eager to write a conservative character, even in the context of a story that's making fun of the religious right, because I'd just be interested in that almost as a writing exercise. It's sort of like Archie Bunker. Archie Bunker was probably meant to be a character to make fun of, fuddy-duddy conservatives. But then a lot of people really resonated with the character of Archie Bunker and came to love the character of Archie Bunker because he felt like a real person. The intention of what Archie Bunker was to make fun of some people is different than the character of Archie Bunker as sort of a real character who feels alive, like someone you could meet. Archer doesn't feel like a character who could exist or you could meet. And so it's hard to comment on him. I'd say you need intellectual diversity in these companies so that you can do political bits and have someone who's there who kind of says, well, I'm a religious right guy. And I get what you're saying when you're kind of making fun of weird fundamentalist cult type of things that think the end times are coming tomorrow and it's going to happen tomorrow, guys. Get your bottles of water ready to go because you're going to be starving to death when all the bleep hits the fan and we're all left behind. Well, if you have a religious right person on staff, they can kind of be a sounding board, excuse me, Cop Squad, to let you know if your portrayal of the religious right is coming off as a little bit weird or out of touch with reality. 20 minutes, let's call it there. I've sort of said the same thing twice. I'm number one Marmaduke fan. I love you guys. I'm super triggered, guys. I'm so triggered by this. I'll catch y'all later.